When I speak about the pipelines and the oil sands, people wonder why a member of a union that works at the oil sands would be maybe talking about the tar sands or oil sands. So I want to make it clear that whenever we talk about energy in Canada, I and my members have a vested interest. And our interest is to keep working, to keep Albertans working, keep Canadians working for a long time. But what we're seeing now in Canada, in Alberta, and in Fort McMurray especially, is that the plan that they're on is not going to keep people working for a long time. The plan that they're on is to get the oil out of the ground and into a refinery somewhere as quickly as possible to make as much money as possible right now. We saw not too long ago, just a few years ago, a downturn in the market, 2007, 2008. It was pathetic in Fort McMurray. It was pathetic. How we survived it, I don't know. We had to ensure that the real estate, for example, kept super inflated so that we wouldn't see all of a sudden a whole bunch of houses on the market. We had to ensure that the rents, which were 3 times what you pay here in Edmonton, would stay at those even if the occupancy rates were under 13%. We had to make sure that the rates would stay up there so that it didn't cause a situation where people would get rid of their homes and move into apartments because their homes were super inflated, really of no value, but it had to be kept up there. And the only thing that kept it going was the hope that this was going to be just a blip, that we'd go around this situation, and oil would come back up, and then the players would come and play again, and we'll make this happen for as long as they want to play. But I'm here today to tell you that the game won't be as long as people believe it's going to be. Not at the rate that taking it out. And it's obvious now that that's what it is. We're not seeing any refineries being built. The players out there in Fort McMurray, the same players in the US, Amoco and Shell and Exxon, that have their refineries and upgraders in the US, it's much cheaper for them to rent space on a pipeline, get their stuff down there and get it refined than it is to build upgraders up here. It's much cheaper than investing for a future that they're not certain really exists. The reason today that the bitumen is being sold at a lower value is because there's other stuff on the market that needs less work to put into your gas tanks. So it sells better, faster. So we're competing against that. And if we don't produce a product like Mike was suggesting, we're likely going to be left behind. When I speak about sustaining work for our members and Albertans and Canadians, we have been talking about an energy strategy. We've been talking, my union, the CEP at the time, today we call it Unifor. We just built a new union 2 weeks ago in Canada. It's called Unifor. A bigger union, so maybe we can scream a little louder and be heard. We've had an energy policy that we built in the late 90s, anticipating the Kyoto Accord, and we've been upgrading our policy at Kyoto, after Kyoto, And again, not too long ago, when we were faced with the fact that Canada did not want to recognize Kyoto anymore, that we're just going to go our own way and do what we want and allow industry to do what they want without any strategy. But our strategy says basically three things. First, a strategy for Canadians needs to ensure that 25 years of reserve is kept for Canadians. We're a cold country. We're going to need that oil for ourselves. So before we talk about exporting, before we talk about doing anything else, we talk about protecting the interests of Canadians, especially the Canadians in the north. We're all in the north anyway. We all get snow. That's the first thing. The second thing about a strategy is to include the right people in the discussion. We can't be up in Fort McMurray disturbing the lands of the First Nations people without having them at the table. We can't be disturbing the planet without having the people on the planet that care about it, that talk about it, and those are the environmental groups. And we can't be at a table with the government without labor, because we have our interests too. So we need those people at the table to develop the strategy. Peter is offering us that. Me and Peter are on the same page in a lot of things. So Peter says the New Democrat will have that strategy and that group of people together, and we'll work it out. And the other thing, of course, in our strategy is to ensure that what we're doing is sustainable, that we're not taking it all out at one time, that we're leaving some in the ground for the future. We're going to see drastic change in the demands for oil. There's no question. There's no question that the issues of climate change are changing our views on how we use fossil fuels, how we use a lot of things. The demand is changing already. Do I see some faces in here? We go back, just go back 40 years, and what it looked like 40 years ago. And the changes that were introduced in 40 years. Now, you can pretty well triple that every year now. Changes in technology and changes in the way we think are so fast that our demands for oil are going to change. It's more likely that you're going to see the new generation buying a little Ford Fusion than you'll see them buy a Ford F-150 truck. Except here in Alberta, we'll sell 150 trucks for a little while. But those are the things that are happening in the world, everywhere in the world. Not only here in Alberta, not only in the US, the world is changing. The price of oil is going to come to a point that we won't afford it. We won't want to afford or spend big money on gasoline because we'll change our ways. It's going to happen. And we're going to see more storms, and we're going to see a lot of that stuff that's going to push us into change. The next part of our policy, our strategy, is to have a transition process. Because the workers in the oil sands and the workers in the manufacturing of the products that are coming to the oil sands and workers right across the country are going to need to be able to have work elsewhere. And we should be able to develop a transition into some other work. If we don't, and we know as Canadians, if we don't, things will happen. Bad things will happen. When the government introduced the moratorium on fishing in the East Coast, without an alternative, we created poverty. We created disaster in an economy in the East Coast because we had no alternative plans for those people in those communities. So we need to develop that. Anyway, Chip is looking at me saying, you've used up your 10 minutes. But I appreciate being able to talk a little bit about it, and we'll be around for a few more hours, and we'll take some questions. Thanks.